I started using HelloFresh when both my husband and I were in the thick of building our businesses. We both enjoy cooking, but didn't have time for the shopping and the prep. We still wanted to give our family healthy, delicious meals, so we signed up for HelloFresh. Every recipe was a smash hit with not only us, but all 3 of our kids. HelloFresh made it possible for us to stay in our genius zone and freed up more of our time to be present with our kids. I've given it as a gift to fellow entrepreneurs who are in those early stages of building so they can eat fresh and healthy while growing their businesses. Menu planning doesn't have to be one more thing on your to-do list. With over 50 recipes and other market fresh items, you have endless options for yummy food without the hassle. With summer upon us, you can cut down on time spent in the kitchen so you can get back to enjoying the summer sunshine and building that business. Thanks to HelloFresh's quick and easy recipes. Every week's menu features options that are ready in just 20 minutes or less, which is even quicker than fast food delivery or frozen pizzas. And when you sign up today, you'll unlock free appetizers for life. Get the party started or enjoy a little pre-dinner treat with an appetizer of your choice in every HelloFresh box for free. Go to HelloFresh.com/MUAPPS for free appetizers for life. 1 appetizer item per box while subscription is active. That's free appetizers for life at HelloFresh.com/MUAPPS. Head over and get started with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
There is no set of traits that's right for this. There is no background that's right. It's all about what you're willing to make happen and the community that you can have to support you in that journey.
Welcome to the Millionaire University Podcast. I'm your host, Brien Gearin, back with you today. And in today's class, we're going to learn from Carter Osborne of Carter Osborne Consulting, a 6-figure college essay tutoring business that Carter started as a side gig to his full-time PR job and grew it to the point where he could leave his job and focus solely on consulting, bringing in over $100,000 in revenue per year and in only half the year. So class is in session. Carter, take it away. Carter, let's just jump right in here. Give us a quick origin story. How did you get to where you are? How did you start this business as a side hustle? And how did you niche into college essays tutoring versus what comes to mind for me would be like standardized testing tutoring, which I see that all over the place, but that seems like that's the norm. How did you niche?
Well, don't worry, we're getting there. I have plenty of horror stories about trying to be an SAT tutor in my early days. But no, the start of my business, and I think a lot of your listeners will relate to this, frankly, I needed to pay tuition for college. That was my big motivation. So, necessity was sort of the mother of invention there. I had finished my undergrad degree at Stanford and then came up to the University of Washington right away to start my graduate degree, which, by the way, had nothing to do with education or college admissions or anything in this field. I came up and needed to find something to help pay tuition, and I knew that I had a few skills just from my undergrad days in tutoring and consulting, and I'd done a little bit of creative writing work as well. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll become a part-time tutor for like 1 or 2 years. It'll help take the edge off tuition, and that'll be fine. I didn't want to go work at an established tutoring firm. Frankly, the hourly rates were a little bit low, so I thought I could be better off just striking out on my own and finding some of my own clients. So when I started out, I was offering tutoring services in 3 different areas. Academics, all up, just any topic a student wanted to work on, I felt confident that I could help them in, which later ended up being untrue. Like pre-calculus really kicked my butt, and physics I was terrible at in high school and terrible at as a tutor. So academics was my first sort of category. My second was standardized test prep, like you were saying. And then my third was college essays. And the reason that I got started in that really was because I had loved my creative writing classes in undergrad. I was one of the rare people who loved writing my own college essays back in the day. And so I thought that I could step in and try to help students craft the best stories possible. So those were my 3 areas. And that did help kind of take the edge off tuition during my first year of graduate school, although I only had a small handful of clients. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more later about how to build up a client list early, but I really had a very small group. It was somewhere around 3 kids, 4 if you really are generous with what, the term client can really mean. So for me, it was a small gig my first year and a relatively small gig my second year. From there, the client referral network started to take over and we kind of grew into what it is today.
Cool. Well, and you're right. I want to get all the nuts and bolts out of you today because I am very interested, and I know our listeners will be very interested in how you grew this thing to a 6-figure business. But let's start right there. You started mentioning your very first customers. When you first broke in, what was the very first thing you did when you're like, okay, I'm going to do this? How do I get customer number one?
This is the trick that everybody asks me is how do you get your foot in the door for something like tutoring so that you can get that referral network started? For me, I think it was a combination of skill and frankly, luck, if I'm being honest. There's a little bit of both. I think for every entrepreneur's journey, there's both. And there certainly was for me. When I came back up to Seattle for graduate school, I reached out to 3 different people who were already established in this industry. There was a college consultant in the Seattle area that I actually went to when I was a high schooler. I went to her for one session like 6 years earlier, but somehow she still remembered me. And she was nice enough to have like a 30-minute intro meeting with me to talk about how to be a college application consultant. So I met with her. I emailed another woman who was in college essays, who was the wife of a teacher at my high school who I never took his class, but I just knew that this person was out there. So I emailed him and he connected me with her. And then I emailed a family friend who was an SAT tutor in New York. So it's like truly reaching to the furthest edges of my network to try to find anybody who had a foothold in this industry already. And then basically said, hey, look, I just came out of Stanford. I feel like I could be a good tutor in these areas. Could I get 30 minutes with you to talk about how to structure this business and maybe how to create like a client referral network? And those conversations ended up being the foundation that got me in the door. That first woman I talked about referred my first 3 clients to me during my first year because she's very popular and runs a long wait list. That's a point I want to come back to that I think is important in this industry. So she referred my first 3 clients to me. That second woman I talked to you about she runs an evening college essay camp during the summer times, and she had more students than she thought she was going to have. So she hired me as an evening overflow coach, like a couple nights a week. And that helped me get introduced to a few families. And then that third guy who was the SAT prep tutor in New York helped me figure out all the kind of nuts and bolts, the structure of how to price myself relative to the market and how to advertise myself. I mean, all those things came from him. So those 3 conversations were the foundation of my success. I mean, all of them were drawn from people who already had a foothold in this industry. And then I got to kind of just take a little bit from what they could give me, just one small foothold. And that ended up being the way that I could grow my referral network in the future.
Okay, so I'm going to follow you down that rabbit hole for a second here, and then we'll scope back out, because now I'm really interested to know, so what's the industry like? It sounds like these folks were kind enough to help you, but they didn't view you as a threat to their revenue. Is everybody friends and in cahoots here, or is there massive saturation? How did that work?
Isn't that funny? Whenever I talk about this, I feel like people kind of like cock their head and go, is this business? Were we talking about the same thing? Yeah, in the world of college admissions, there is a bizarre imbalance between supply and demand right now. And that's what I've observed from talking with folks and from every conference I go to. Everybody says the same thing. There are vastly more families looking for support in the college admissions process than there are counselors to help them. And this makes sense if you kind of think about it. The average student to counselor ratio at a high school in the United States is roughly 400 to 1. It's just an overwhelming number. So no high schooler out there is getting robust support from their in-house counseling office in their school, which means they go out and try to find private consultants like me. But it's a relatively new industry. This is only like really 10 to 15 years old, give or take. That's really reaching out to the far end, which means there's not a lot of us established yet. So, just as an anecdotal piece of evidence, everybody I know who is established in this field, literally everybody I know, runs a wait list every year. They fill up and they run a wait list. Some of them open their client slots in January and start running a wait list by February. They fill up within 1 month for the entire year's worth of clients. It's that kind of an industry right now. And that may change in the future. That's entirely possible. But for right now, that's what we're dealing with. So you can imagine when I went to these first few people and said, hey, are you running a wait list? I would love if you could refer just 1 or 2 clients to me. What they thought was, yeah, I've got a wait list a mile long. I've got people on there that I know I'm never going to work with. I'd be happy to point them over your way as long as I trust you to be a good consultant and kind of benefit my reputation. They don't want to take a reputational risk by referring their clients to someone who's not going to do a good job. But otherwise, sure, it's not a threat to their bottom line at all. It's people they weren't probably going to work with anyways. So it's a really weird time in this industry that creates unique economic incentives and I think unique opportunities for people who are looking to get their foot in the door.
Wow. Okay. So that's pretty cool. I mean, you don't, like you said, you don't see that typically in the business world where what would technically be competitors are like, hey, come on in. I've got so much work that there's no way I'm going to get to all of it. I'm happy to bring you in. And then that's good for them because when they encounter people that they can't take on, they're like, hey, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'll put you on my wait list. If you want help quicker, I've got a guy, right? Everybody wants to be the person who's got a guy or a gal. And that's a perfect place to be for them. And it's a win-win for you.
That's exactly right. And, the only other piece of nuance I would add to this that I think is interesting for folks who are thinking about getting into any kind of service industry is that I came into this, and I still am today, a college essay specialist, right? So I've kind of been mixing the terms college essays and college applications in this interview so far, but they are different. And in fact, people specialize in those two areas separately. So I'm a college essay specialist, and there's not a lot of us out there. Most people in this industry, I would venture to guess probably 90% of people who work in this industry as consultants do college applications all up. And that means that they work with students on a full comprehensive package that covers list building for the kinds of schools that they should apply to, admission strategies, test prep. They'll do some essay work as well, but you can kind of see it's like the full comprehensive package. They take a student from zero to finished college applications to all of the schools that are right for them, right? And then folks like me are more specialists that come in right at the end of the process to fine-tune college essays. Or in my case, I really work from the ground up with college essays. But it's interesting. A lot of these folks who do the more full-scope college application consulting, frankly, don't like doing essays. That's just not their thing. They don't enjoy slogging through messy sentences with like 16-year-olds. Like that's not what they wake up in the morning to do. They like doing the high-level like list building and strategy side of it. So what it means is that the more I went out and talked to college application consultants, especially locally who I had strong connections with, the more I got referral channels set up with people who said, yeah, I have these students who I like to work with, but I would be happy to kind of farm them out to you just for the college essay part, and then they can come back to me for everything else. Or if they have families coming to them who only want help with the essays, they'll push them to me instead because they don't want to take that work on. So it's interesting, offering a niche service, ironically, actually expands the market opportunities a little bit, especially in relationship with, well, I was going to say competitors, but really not competitors, just partners who operate different firms around the area.
Right. And I would argue that the essay, correct me if I'm wrong, but the essay is a massively important part of that application to a college because that's kind of the one place where the college can literally get to know you without, having you sitting in their chair in front of them, right, for an interview.
It's in my business interest to agree with you, but I do genuinely agree with you too. That's right. Yeah, there's a national survey of colleges every year from an association that compiles the top categories that colleges consider for admissions. And every year, without fail, essays are either number 3 or number 4, and the top 3 are always just grades in various sort of carved up chunks. So really, after grades, essays are the biggest thing that students can do. And really, when it comes to their senior year, that's the last big lever you can pull. Right? Your grades are largely baked by senior year. Your standardized test scores are going to be what they're going to be. And those are really kind of down on the list now after COVID. So really, for students who are looking to boost their chances once they get to senior year, the essay is the last big opportunity to really go for it. And that's why a lot of families end up calling me.
And as someone who I do a lot of copywriting, I don't call myself a professional copywriter, but I do a ton of it in my business. And I've seen a lot of it. I work with a lot of copywriters. I'm very close with a lot of professional copywriters. And those who can write great copy, whether it's a sales page or a website or a college essay, that is a huge opportunity for you to impress or to sell yourself, right? For whatever it is, in this case, a college essay. That's just an incredible way to differentiate yourself from the competition.
That's exactly right. I mean, the main thing that college admissions officers are looking for in these essays is a student who is self-reflective, self-aware. They can kind of bring out a deep theme about their character or their personality in an essay. Those are rare skills these days. I mean, that kind of critical, self-reflective thinking process, that's a very valuable, very rare skill. So yeah, when we show that in the essay, it's like a light bulb for a lot of these admissions officers going, whoa, I don't really care about this grade over here in this English class because now I know this person can write and they can write well. I have proof of it right here and I feel like I know this student. That's a huge leg up.
Right. Okay. So I told you I'd follow you down that rabbit hole and I certainly did. I want to zoom back out to where we were talking about how you get those customers. So you're working with established folks in the industry who kind of call you in on their wait list. So now you're starting to get established. You have 2 or 3 or 4 clients. Do you do any of your own like outbound marketing or is it just purely all referral for you? And how does that work in the industry as a whole?
Yeah. So I have 2 pathways for getting new clients. One is referrals from other consultants, which we talked about. And the other pathway is word of mouth referrals from my either current or past clients. And that's it. I don't do any outbound marketing. I never have. If anybody listening to this is looking for tips on marketing, I am not your guy. Go listen to another episode probably. It's just not my thing. I've never been good at it. Ironically, even though my full-time job for 4 years before going full-time in this job was as a PR director. So you'd think I'd be good at this, but I just simply am not. It's not my thing, which is fine. The good news for my business, and I think for a lot of people in this industry, is that building a really close and personal relationship with your clients through the college application process leads to a lot of trust. And usually clients pop out the other end feeling really good about the outcome in the process, or at least I like to think that my clients do. And so that leads to a lot of word of mouth referrals. Last year, just for a piece of anecdotal evidence, again, last year, I had more clients that I could take. I had to start myself referring inbound clients to other consultants. So I kind of became the person who first, helped me in this process. I was referring business out because I reached my cap and I didn't spend $1 on marketing. It was all just word of mouth referral.
Wow. Okay, that's impressive. So there's really no necessity for your own outbound marketing. It's all coming in by referrals or word of mouth. Do you incentivize any of your current clients for the referrals, or is it just, you seem like a pretty awesome dude. They might have just been like, hey, this guy got us great results, or he helped Johnny and Sally and he can help your kid too.
It's the second one, honestly. I don't have any referral bonuses or discounts or anything like that. I send out one sort of prompting email in the springtime to all of the clients who I just worked with, right around when their kids are making their college decisions, saying, hey, it was a pleasure working with you. If you have any friends or families or neighbors who would be interested, feel free to share my name and number. It would be a pleasure to work with someone else in your network. That's it. I send one outreach email, and that usually leads to a bump in inbound inquiries. And that's it. Everything else is just organic word of mouth whenever somebody happens to ask a past client who they know in the college admissions space.
Okay, so I'm going to venture a guess. You probably don't even need like a Google business profile, like with reviews. Do you even bother with those things? Are they necessary?
I don't have one, and they're not necessary. I will share an interesting take that I've heard on this whole Google business profile thing, which I'm not totally sure if I believe in. So I'm just throwing it out there for folks to consider. But the interesting thing with this industry is that, it won't come as a surprise to any of your listeners that college is often seen in the United States as a little bit of like a brand and luxury good. Actually, not a little bit. For a lot of people, it really is a big brand and luxury good, right? Like that's the thing. That's why you put the bumper sticker on the back of your car and whatever. So for a lot of people, they want to work with someone in the college admissions space who also has a little bit of like a rare and almost inaccessible brand. It's like, oh, I got connected with like this person that you have to know a friend of to be able to work with. And for some reason, that makes people feel really like good about the consultant who they're working with. Now, I don't try to position myself like this at all. That's like not my intention. But I know consultants in this industry who intentionally don't do any SEO on their website. They don't do any Google profiles or Yelp profiles or anything like that. They kind of keep themselves quiet so that when clients are thinking of reaching out to them, they feel like they're getting a kind of like rare person, and it has the same attractive allure of like a selective college for them. It's very interesting. It's kind of like the luxury goods market a little bit, but translated onto college admissions. And frankly, that's what college admissions is as an industry, right? The Harvards and the Stanfords and the Yales of the world, all of that is artificial scarcity to be able to boost their brand reputation, then ultimately the dollars they can extract from their business. It's an interesting industry in that way, and you'll meet people who have different philosophies there.
Okay, and then last question on this marketing piece. Do you do any sort of social media? Do you have like organic pages, or we are literally, this is the exclusive Carter, even though he's not trying to be, but that's the only way to get him is if you know someone?
From like a digital marketing perspective, I am like caveman consultant over here. I don't do anything. I have no social media. I don't even have personal social media. And then I have none of those pages we talked about before and don't do any marketing. So there you go. It's like fully word of mouth, organically driven phone calls and emails. It's very old school over here.
That's refreshing. Do you have a fax machine too?
I wish. That's next on the list.
I love it. All right, so let's talk about logistics of this business. I am super interested, as I'm sure our listeners are, in understanding more of how this works. So who do you help? We know it's college or high school students that are preparing to go to college, but do they have to be local to you? Can they be national? Do you do this only on Zoom? Do you ever meet people in person? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, if we go back to 2020 when COVID happened, there was an interesting split in businesses where some really suffered from COVID and some really benefited. And I think it was just luck of the draw based on the structure of your business and clientele. I was very fortunate to be among some of the small businesses that benefited from COVID. And that was mainly because before COVID, I was meeting all of my students in person. I was like driving around Seattle, getting stuck in hours long traffic. I did a lot of podcasts and like singing to myself in the car between meetings. But what it meant was I could only meet with a couple students a day, really at most, because I was simultaneously trying to work my full-time job at this PR firm. So it was a lot of work to kind of make all this happen. And then COVID hit, and suddenly it became okay to transition very sort of like one-on-one, high-touch, sort of tailored tutoring services onto Zoom. Before COVID, that wasn't really something that people paid a lot of money for. Now it, of course, is seen almost as equivalent to in-person tutoring. So as soon as COVID happened and everything went on Zoom, it allowed me to, first of all, expand my clientele outside of Seattle, but second of all, put meetings back to back more efficiently so that I could take more students. And on the topic we've been discussing, if I take more students in one year, that grows the referral network for the next year, which exponentially grows the referral network for the next year. So 2020 for me really was kind of like a sharp uptick in my client growth, both because of geographical diversity and because of a larger base referral network that could then exponentially grow over the years from there. So Zoom was a big accelerant for sure. And in terms of the students that I work with, you asked about, are they all in sort of a local area? It started out that way for the first 3 years. COVID happened and it distributed. But interestingly, in the college admissions space, and I think for a lot of digitally based service providers, you kind of get pockets just depending on wherever your name has gotten out. So right now I have pockets mainly in Seattle, the Bay Area, Chicago, and New York, and then randomly in a couple of small places in Texas. But it's just schools where somebody's friend happened to have moved, from Seattle like 10 years ago, and then they told them about me, and there you go, right? And then suddenly my name gets around the school, and that becomes a base of clientele. So it really is an interesting geographical system now. And when this year is my first year finally having some international clients as well, which is very exciting. But there's no sort of rhyme or reason to it. It's not like intentionally trying to expand to the East Coast or something. It's more someone happened to know someone on the East Coast, and now suddenly that school kind of knows about me.
You know that's the sound of another sale on your online Shopify store. But did you know Shopify powers selling in person too? With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Take customers from picking it out to picking it up. Shopify syncs in-store inventory with Google, so when local customers search for that thing they want that you have, bam, you're there. Demand meets supply. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/MU, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/MU to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/MU.
As a business-to-business marketer, you know that your needs are unique. B2B buying cycles can be painfully long, and your customers face incredibly complex decisions. Isn't it time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you? LinkedIn Ads empowers marketers with solutions for you and your customers. LinkedIn Ads allows you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. You'll have direct access to and build relationships with decision makers. There's 1 billion members, 180 million of which are senior-level executives, and 10 million are C-level executives. You'll be able to drive results with targeting and measurement tools built specifically for B2B. In technology, LinkedIn generated 2 to 5x higher return on ad spend than other social media platforms, and 79% of B2B content marketers said LinkedIn produces the best results for paid media. So if you're ready to work with a partner who respects the B2B world you operate in, then you need LinkedIn Ads. So make B2B marketing everything it can be and get a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MUPod to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MUPOD. Terms and conditions apply. All right. And so since you're all on Zoom now, you're exclusively on Zoom, right? So you can start bringing on more and more clients. What does a session look like? How long is it? How many do you stack in a day? And then we're going to talk about your seasonality a bit later in the show here, but it might play right into that.
Yeah, well, we were really going to the nuts and bolts now. You can feel free to stop me whenever you want because I could go deep here. But a standard meeting, so with most of my students, I meet with them for 1 hour once a week to just keep a consistent process. We meet at a standard time. And my meetings, actually, I'm glad that you asked about this. Different consultants will have different approaches, particularly when working with like high school students. I find that a lot of folks use a very structured approach. I think it's sort of a feeling of pressure that you need to have something to differentiate yourself. So someone will come up with like the 4-step process to your perfect personal statement, or like the 3-step process to identify your deepest values, or something like that. I have no structure whatsoever, which for those of you listening should not surprise you at this point. I'm not really like a detailed, structured guy. I'm more of a let go with the flow person. I have no structure for my conversations at all. What I like to do is have a free-flowing conversation with my students. And as we're talking, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, that could be a good nugget for like a theme for a personal statement. Or this is a really interesting topic, but it feels more like a supplemental essay, which is a school-specific essay that we address later in the process. Or maybe that one feels promising, but I know that that's kind of risky territory, like it's political or it's, it has too much to do with this or that. So I'm kind of having those filters going in the back of my mind as we talk. So I'll take notes. All the student has to do is talk, just like talk about their lives, which I find for a lot of kids is very refreshing and they enjoy the process. I'll try to crack a few jokes and make them feel good, and loosen up a little bit so they tell me more. And then at the end of our process, I send them my notes with some really distilled next steps and takeaways, forward that on to the parents separately so that they can keep an eye on our process, but they don't feel the need to be actively involved with all of our work together. And then we meet again the next week and do it all over again. So that's kind of the breakdown of the process. And then, of course, students get used to it over time. The college essay process is a lot of work. There's so many essays these students have to tackle these days. But after they get used to it with a couple of essays, they can start to roll on their own a little bit more. And then my job really is less about helping them edit a paragraph or structure an idea this way or that way. My job really becomes about being an advisor. So we'll meet and brainstorm and outline ideas together. And then I'll say, okay, go nuts. You know how to do this. Go write your essay. And then we'll do one light round of revision on it afterwards. And then you can submit and you're all good to go. So it becomes more efficient over time.
So you said 1 hour once a week. I want to talk about pricing. I'm kind of setting that up here. But what are the sessions like? Are they 3 months at a time? Are they 90 days? Is it as many as a person needs? Could they have 2 of them and be done with Carter? Or could they have 13, 15, 20 of them and call it a day? How does that work?
You've just tapped into a really interesting and somewhat controversial discussion within the college admissions world. And actually, I imagine within a lot of different service providing sort of industries. There are counselors in the college admissions field who do package deals, preset package deals that come with a certain number of sessions, 10 meetings to build up these essays and select your list for that. And then there are people like me who are hourly consultants. So my flat rate is $225 an hour, and I am just an hourly consultant. That applies to everything that I do. If I'm editing an essay, if I'm meeting with a kid, if I'm calling an admissions office to ask a couple of questions on behalf of a family, all of that falls into the same rate. I bill them at the end of the month with an invoice that totals our time. We're good to go. And to your question, there's no end date, really. We meet as much as a student needs or as much as the parents want. I mean, we just kind of go until they feel like they've reached the end of the line for wherever they need to be. With most consultants, they use package deals. So I admit that I'm in the minority with that structure. Most consultants use package deals. That gets back a little bit to what we talked about before, where a lot of admissions consultants have like list building services and essay services and strategic services for different applications to different schools. They have a lot of services that they can carve out into different packages. Some will do athletic recruitment specialties. So they have a little bit more flexibility to use packages. The reason that I use an hourly system and that it's worked for me is that I find that with package structures, those packages themselves, while they get you upfront cash flow, right? Clients typically pay upfront, which is helpful, and they help people manage their clientele and availability a little bit more. You know that you can sell 10 of your comprehensive package a year before you're capped out, whereas I'm a little bit more squishy. My clients could come and go whenever they want to. The disadvantage that I think happens with these package deals, they create a natural roll-off point for your clients, right? I mean, if you get to the end of your 5 meetings and you need to re-up another $2,000 to buy another 5 meetings, a lot of people will say, I feel like we're good. Those 5 meetings were fine. We don't want to front more cash for this. I feel like my kid can take it the rest of the way with us by their side, and then you lose that customer. Whereas for me, there really is no natural endpoint, right? It's just a weekly meeting. And to cut it off, you have to be very proactive and say, wherever you are, I feel like is good enough. And, we can take it from here. But that's much more proactive rather than reactive when the package naturally runs out. Do you see what I mean? So that kind of
Yeah.
that kind of difference in the structure, I think my theory is that actually helps me keep clientele for longer. Ironically, even though I'm an hourly tutor, I do think it helps me keep clientele for longer.
Okay, interesting. So actually refresh me on, I graduated like 10, 12 years ago. At what part in the year does this become a need for students, or is it a need throughout the year where it's like, hey, this isn't due for 10 months, but it's a good time to start working with Carter on it? How does it look like in terms of timing on that?
The timing is highly seasonal, as you would imagine. So applications are typically due between November and January. November 1st and like January 15th or so is typically the application season. I start working with students in April or May. So I'm already working with my first batch of students right now so that they can apply in November. And before anybody panics out there, we're not going to go all the way up to November. These are the kids who want to get it done in summertime and then just like enjoy their senior year. But that's the first clump of people. These are the early birds. And then I'll get another wave kind of when the school year begins in August or September for people who come into senior year and then suddenly go, whoa, we really need to work on this. And then I'll get another wave of like the last minute sort of break for the finish line people who are, they contact me midway through October for a November 1st deadline. And I love that kind of stuff. I love the chaos of that. It's really fun. So those are kind of my three big bumps, but you can imagine sort of during the year, my on season is roughly from June to December, give or take. And then my off season is January to May. So it's kind of the second half of the year is busy. The first half of the year is pretty calm. Which is funny, when I first started doing this job full time, which just happened back in January of this year, I quit my full-time PR job and I was like, great, I'm going to go all in on my business. I'm very excited. I had all this energy. And then, of course, within 2 weeks, I hit my off season and suddenly no one wanted to talk to me. And it was really weird. So I got to spend a lot of time on networking and business development. And only now are we starting to convert all of that work into actual sort of work with high school students again. So there is a pretty sharp seasonality around this.
Wow. Okay. I'm gonna take a left turn on that and ask you, squirrel syndrome here. So basically, it sounds like for 6 months out of the year, you just kind of get to chill, or how do you populate your 6 months leading up to the busy season?
A little bit, honestly, which is great. And I think you can choose the extent to which you want to chill. So I know people who fill every hour of the off season doing other things, right? They'll work with students who are transferring certain schools. They'll pivot to like graduate school applications, which have a different timeline, or they'll take on like a freelance writing gig in the off season to fill their hours or something. I think that's great. I work with a few transfer students every year, and, I work with students on like letters of continued interest if they've gotten waitlisted, which are usually in February and March. So there's some kind of like low grade work that happens during the off season. It's not totally off. And then, of course, there's business development and networking and all the kind of things you do to build or prepare yourself rather for the coming on season. But I have to say, during my off season this year, the depths of the off season in like February, March, April, I was working maybe 2 hours a day, I would say, roughly, like 1 to 2 hours a day. And there were whole stretches where I just didn't work for like 4 days in a row. And that's what it was, right? And that was great. It was wonderful to be able to step away from work. And, if we had this conversation in September or October, I'm probably going to be working 12 to 14 hour days, So it's like you kind of get both ends. So you get a long vacation in the off season and then a long, really heavy kind of intense on season in the second half of the year.
So back to, you mentioned your high season being that summer through October range. How many students do you keep on your roster?
I wish I could give you a clean answer. As you can tell, nothing is simple in terms of like data measurement in this process. But again, this goes back to the hourly structure that I use. If I used a package structure, I could give you a number. I would say I have 36 students on my comprehensive package and boom. For me as an hourly tutor, I have students who meet with me every week. I have students who meet with me every other week. I have students who come to me and meet with me for 1 hour and I never see them again, right? They just needed a little bit of help to get over some kind of bump in their process. So it's kind of hard to say a number of students because it's so much variance in terms of how they work with me. But the number I typically say is I hold at any given time roughly like 30 clients that I'm working with on any given week. So 30 clients, either one-offs or they just contact me for some edits on an essay they already wrote, or a full comprehensive student where I'm working with them from brainstorming their first essay to editing their last essay. That combination usually goes to about 30 at any given moment. I always tell my friends, and when September comes around, I'm like, it's been great, and I will see you in January, like goodbye. So I think that that's how the process works. So yeah, I think you asked before about, the number of sessions, the hours that I work a day or something. During the on season, a really heavy time, I'll do 6-ish meetings a day with about half an hour spaced between them. So that takes up about 8 hours of just meeting time. And then, of course, there's like administrative email work. I'm the only one here. So if a client needs anything, I'm the only guy to answer the email. And then there's a lot of time spent on offline revision too, working on essays, leaving comments or suggestions or helping students clean up a certain section. There's a lot of time there. So between those three, yeah, the hours really add up during the on season, which can get to be a lot. But I typically cap the meetings at 6 per day. I used to do 7 per day, and it just does not work. It's too much, right? It's too much in one day to really handle reasonably.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned kind of doing offline work. So there's your hour where you're meeting with each individual student, but then kind of describe to me the work when you mentioned that off camera work. What does that look like?
Well, I think everyone listening has probably had a horror story where they're in a meeting and somebody decides to live edit a document while they're talking, and everybody decides if they like this word or that word and whether that needs to be a period or a semicolon, and it takes forever and you don't get anywhere, right? Like that's the process of live editing. Even one-on-one, it's really painful. I used to do that with my students and very quickly learned that that's really not how the process should be done. So when it comes to high level concepts like brainstorming or outlining or talking about big revisions to like a whole theme or something, that's what we'll cover in our meeting time. And then when it comes to cleaning essays up, like going from a first draft to a final draft and really polishing and editing, that kind of stuff happens offline, usually on Google Docs. So I'll go in and leave some comments and track changes and a couple of suggestions here and there. A student can go in, clean them up, reject what they don't like, accept what they like. And then we'll do that a couple times back and forth. And then the essay will be there. So that takes all of that gunky, picky work offline, and we can preserve our meeting time for the kind of higher level strategy and brainstorming sessions that I think are really valuable for students.
Okay. And then part of that, the offline work, if you will, that's part of your billing is, so let's say you spend an hour on the call with them and then you need to spend 45 minutes commenting on their rough draft. Does that go on the billing too?
Everything gets billed the same there. Yep. Any time I spend moving a student's process forward is billed time. Meetings, revisions, calling admissions offices, double checking work with another counselor if they want a second opinion or something. All of that is billed time. Yeah.
Okay. Love that. Yeah, that wouldn't make sense if you didn't charge for it, but I had to ask.
Yeah, no, I get it. For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of margins for this business, they sound like they're pretty solid because I think you mentioned you're the only guy, so you don't have any sort of back office team or assistant or other partner in the business. So kind of talk to us about the margins in a type of tutoring consulting style business like this.
I think that in terms of margins, it really depends on the kind of tutoring that you're doing. So I've landed in a field that tends to be lower hours, but higher margin, right? So my margins are somewhere around like 90% because I'm the only guy here. I don't spend any money on marketing. I have all the sort of like fixed cost things I already need at my desk. And there you go, right? There's not a lot of cost required yearly to kind of keep this thing moving. So almost all the dollars that I make, I keep in profit, and that's great. The challenge, of course, is that I'm the only one here. And it's a pretty niche industry. I mean, college essays, you are by definition limited to families who have kids who are specifically 16 and 17 years old. So it's like there's a trade-off there. Your market's lower, but your margins are higher. There's another style of tutoring that I think people will be more familiar with, which is like the everyday kind of math tutor for the kid in 7th grade who needs help on Algebra 2 or something. You know, there's whole tutoring centers that have a collection of tutors, usually college students, and you pay them, I don't know, $20 an hour. And they can work with these students on a more like high scale way. And that is much lower margin. Usually you need a physical office. You have a big sort of payroll of people, usually part-time workers coming in and out, which means your turnover costs are pretty high. But you get a way broader clientele. I mean, it's literally any family with any kid who needs help in a class. So there's different styles. I think there's radically different styles within the tutoring industry. Within the world of college admissions, it tends to be pretty high margin. People pay a lot for college admission services because the stakes are relatively high for their kids, or at least it feels like the stakes are very high.
And with you being hourly, I imagine you might have mentioned this already, that there's a ton of opportunity for add-on, right? Like, maybe the parents and the child came in saying, hey, I think maybe 5 sessions of this and we'll be good. We'll kind of take it from there. But then before you know it, 5 turns into 8, turns into 10, turns into 15. That's where even more of that profitability comes in, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, we have a lot of that. And, I don't try to stretch it out on purpose, but that really is what happens a lot of the time is, fundamentally, writing is an artistic process. We try to frame it as a very structural thing and like we know all the hacks that colleges like, but really it's an artistic process. And sometimes a kid comes to my meeting and they've totally swung and missed on their first draft. I'm like, it is just not there. In which case I have to tell the kid, I'm sorry, we're gonna fix this together, but you're gonna have to redraft this, and that takes an extra meeting then. So we have to add that in. And the opposite happens too. I have students come in who absolutely crush it. And instead of spending an hour on revision, I spend 15 minutes to just touch up a couple things and then they're good to go. So there's a lot of sort of flexibility there, but that's in part why I like the hourly model as well. I think that a flexible billing structure matches the sort of flexible artistic structure of essay writing itself. We can kind of track together that way. And that's why I think it works for a lot of families.
And speaking of that hourly structure, I keep having tons of questions on this because I'm just curious about how, when you first started, you mentioned you had a PR job, you were a full-time employee. When you first started out, was it easier because you had hourly charging? So you're like, I can go to work, do my 9 to 5, get home, and now it's based on the hour. So you have me as long as you need me, or as much as they're willing to pay for. Is that what made that easier? And then I also want to talk about your transition from full-time employee to full-time entrepreneur. So
absolutely. Transitioning, or rather managing my full-time PR job and this college essay business concurrently was only possible because of my hourly structure. It simply would not have worked if I'd tried to do package deals because I didn't have the kind of time to invest into a comprehensive package system for most families. I needed to be able to flex around my work schedule. And anybody who's ever worked in PR or marketing or kind of sister industry knows things are chaotic in there, right? Some days are super calm and some days explode out of nowhere with like no warning. And that means that there were some days where I had to reach out to my students and say, hey, can you start an hour later tonight? Or, hey, can we kind of flex this to do this or that? And students would text me as well and say, oh gosh, I have soccer practice. Can we flex, to like a different day in the week? That kind of stuff happens in this industry, especially when I think you're trying to balance college admissions with a PR job. That kind of side hustle nature of any job requires some flexibility. So the hourly structure worked there for me for sure.
More and more entrepreneurs and investors are discovering the awesome franchise opportunities that exist across a variety of industries. Franchising can simply be the better path, and interest in franchising is at an all-time high. Lucky for you, John Austenson, founder of FranBridge Consulting and a past Millionaire University guest, is here to help you explore the premier franchise opportunities today. John and his FranBridge Consulting team are part of the largest franchise brokerage in the U.S. and have vetted the market thoroughly. FranBridge is hands down the premier source for the best opportunities in the franchise world, including both active and passive opportunities. From tiny homes to youth soccer to industrial hoses to pets, senior care to mental health, and more. John has served as an Inc. 500 franchisor and is a multi-brand franchisee himself. And he does more placements than anyone else in the country. Sign up for a free consultation call with John today or get a free copy of his book, Non-Food Franchising, at franbridgeconsulting.com. That's franbridgeconsulting.com. Available in the U.S. and Canada.
Okay. And then how did you know, because I think a lot of our listeners will be in a similar position, being full-time employed and wanting to hop into entrepreneurship. How did you know that your side hustle, your side gig got to the point where, okay, I can jump ship. I'm leaving my full-time. I'm going headfirst full-time into my own thing?
Yeah, well, let me say first, for anyone listening out there who is making this decision, there's no like real silver bullet determining factor. It's going to be a leap of faith no matter what, right? And it's just going to feel that way. That's how it is. For me, there were really two different factors that played into the decision. One of them was very clear-cut and numerical, which is that I started making more money doing my tutoring business than I was making at my full-time job. So I was a PR director and I came with a lot of responsibility, a lot of time and stress on these big announcements. And then I would do tutoring remember, this is at this time when I'm doing it as a side hustle, it was a part-time job that I was doing for half of the year, 6 months out of the year. And I was making more money doing that than my full-time year-long PR job. And so at some point, it just didn't make sense anymore. I was like, the upside is way too big here. If I tried to go full-time in tutoring, I think I could more than make up for the salary that I'm going to lose for my PR job. And by the way, I'll have like a de facto 3-month vacation every year. So good stuff. Like that decision was pretty easy for me. The second more personal decision was frankly that I just love working with the kids. Education has been a big passion of mine since I was a kid. It's my family business. All of my family are teachers and educators. So for me, I loved working with the kids. It was a lot of fun. And I just enjoyed the day-to-day work more than my PR job. No insult to PR. I think it's a great industry and I had a great experience at my work. But it's not the kind of like fundamental driving, motivating force that I got from educating kids and helping them with the college essay process. So, there was a little bit of an alignment between my personal and financial motivations that I think pushed me in one specific direction. And then January of this year just happened to be the right time when everything else lined up to allow it to happen. But it's different for everybody, right? Everybody's going to have their own journey here. And like I said, it feels like a leap of faith no matter what. So you kind of just have to embrace that. Yeah, that's part of how it goes. I know when I left my full-time job, it was kind of the same thing. It's like, all right, it's now or never, right? Like there's piss or get off the pot. Right. And I'm going to bet that you didn't know that it was going to work out or something. It was a little bit of you just got to go and see what happens. Yep. It was one of those, you just have to have that belief in yourself, that faith in yourself that once you pull that safety net away, it's all on you and you're going to figure it out. It takes a minute to get there, but once you pull that rug out, it can be a great experience. Yeah, I mean, I found that it's fundamentally more motivating to feel like you're kind of the one responsible for it. You're like, this is kind of on me. It's a little bit stressful, but it's also exciting and like very motivating in a foundational way that I feel like, at least for me, working for an employer, it just didn't quite feel that way. Right. It'll shake you to your core. It changes you to your core when your livelihood is reliant purely on you. It is up to nobody else but you. It's quite a mindset. All right, so I have to ask, I'm sure there's folks listening right now who are probably like, oh my gosh, he hasn't even mentioned the biggest question we have, which is AI, right? Kind of could be the elephant in the room. I wanted to save it for later, but what is AI like in your business? How is it impacting it? Or is it something that can be useful in your line of work? I was really hoping we'd get through this without mentioning ChatGPT, but here we are. No, I mean, it really is the big question. In all these college admissions conferences I go to, this is the big thing that everyone talks about is, AI, is it going to change our industry? Right now, the answer is no, not yet. I mean, who knows? 5 years from now, maybe ChatGPT or Microsoft will make like Clippy into an AI-powered super agent, and then I'll be out of a job. Who knows? But for now, we're not there. Right now, ChatGPT and Bard or Gemini now, I guess, and Claude and all these other chatbots cannot produce a compelling college essay, in my mind. If you ask it to write an essay from scratch, maybe provided a few notes, it can't do it, at least not in a convincing way, and certainly not in a way that a high schooler would write the essay. And that's kind of the marker for most college admissions officers. So I always tell my students, I'm totally fine if you want to play around with AI, particularly for like brainstorming and maybe for outlining. I use ChatGPT to help with like creative brainstorming a lot, which is great. So all that's great. Don't use it to draft your essay. Just, get your ideas down, get the outline down, totally fine, but do not use it to draft your essay. It's not there yet, right? Right now, we still need a human touch to make that happen. So we'll see. I kind of question whether large language models by their very design can write a more compelling college essay. I mean, fundamentally, we're talking about a system that is trained to be sort of an averaging system. It's absorbing a huge corpus of information and then spitting out what it sees as like an average, statistical average. Whereas college essays, by definition, need to be sort of edgy and creative to catch an admissions officer's attention. So I have a little bit of doubt whether this like structure of AI, model training can really be effective in the long run for creative writing. But we'll see. For now, it's just not there, though. The biggest thing that AI is missing, there's many, but the biggest thing to me is the nuance. You cannot prompt ChatGPT to write with nuance and with heart and emotion and feeling, right? Something that, especially in a college essay, I imagine matters an incredible amount because a human's going to be able to pick up on this. They can tell that there's human connection and emotion missing from an essay, and AI is just not there yet. And me personally, I don't think it'll ever get there because you just can't physically replace the human. The thing is, too, I think to complement that point, one of the other things that AI, I think cannot do, or what do I know? I don't know what these things can spit out, but like I have not seen it compellingly do is mistakes, sort of like creative or interesting mistakes, or at least authentic mistakes. We have to remember that for all of the writing work that we do for these students, we meaning college essay consultants or college application consultants, they are like 16 years old. They're 17 years old. They write mucky sentences sometimes, and sometimes there's a grammatical error, and like every now and then that kind of stuff slips through. As an admissions officer at a college, if I were to read an essay that is clean and crisp and everything is perfect and it feels very formal, the first thing I would think is, who wrote this essay for this student? Because this is not a 17-year-old. They didn't write this. Like their parent who's a lawyer wrote this, or maybe ChatGPT wrote this, but I wouldn't think it's a kid. So like the best personal statements that I've ever seen have a little bit of those like just rough edges in them. It's clearly written by a teenager who's really trying to express some nuanced part of themselves on the page in 650 words, which is not a lot of space. Some of that coming through actually adds to the authenticity of the essay, and in my opinion, makes it a little bit better. So like as a college essay consultant, part of my role is to improve an essay without fundamentally changing it. There's some ethical, considerations to be made there too. But fundamentally, it's actually better to leave some of those rough edges there because it makes it feel authentic to the admissions reader. So it's very interesting that way.
Yeah, it keeps you human, keeps the student human, right?
Exactly.
Did you say an essay is only 650 words?
The longest essay is 650 words.
Really?
Most of them are like 200 to 250 words. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm far removed from the process, and that's not much at all.
No, it's like a page and a half double spaced, which is a lot to like express some deep and nuanced part of yourself.
Right. I could imagine, like, I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, but a lot of students might need more words than that to really get the point across.
Oh, I would say the average first draft for my students is probably 1,000 to 1,200 words, and then we have to cut it down to 650, which is pretty painful, but it's part of the process.
Okay, awesome. So I want to start landing the plane here. One of the things I haven't asked you yet is, what are the struggles or the liabilities in this type of business? Or is there anything that you're currently working on right now that is, kind of racking your brain as an entrepreneur?
Great question. The challenge is I would carve into two categories. The first would be like the just administrative structure of the business. And this is anything for a solo entrepreneur out there. You wear a lot of hats, of course, that's kind of the standard line. But I think for me, my talent really lies in education and writing and working with the kids. My talent does not lie with like administrative organization, as anyone listening to this has clearly picked up on by now. It's just not my thing, right? But I have to do all that. I have to do all my own invoicing and all my own client organization. I have my big spreadsheet to keep track of people. So a challenge that I face is learning to be more efficient there, not spend so much of my time through, going through all this gunky logistical work and kind of shifting more of my time into the part that I love, which is the educational side. Clearly, I haven't really figured out the marketing thing yet. So, there's pieces like that where if you were in a bigger firm with specialists, like if I had an HR specialist, a marketing specialist, and then I was there, we'd be able to carve that work out and probably fire on more cylinders than I am right now. So that's a challenge for sure. The other challenge that I think comes up in this industry is the diversity of work. Most people in this field, most college application consultants are sole practitioners. They're like me. They're just one person running their own little firm. There are some firms that have like a small group of people, but we all focus very narrowly in like the college admissions process. And there's even folks who focus on the med school admissions process or law school admissions or, general grad school admissions. So there's a lot of fine tuning and like carving out of specific services. I think one challenge that I'm trying to solve right now is how can you take the same fundamental skill, a blend of like creative support, writing support, and consulting generally, and apply it to different fields where it's needed, right? That's an interesting kind of challenge for me. And as an example of just testing the waters, earlier this year, I started branching out into doing some coaching for folks who want to start their own tutoring services, basically folks who want to start coming into this field or a similar tutoring field. And I did that for 3 months and then found out that I didn't like it at all. And so I stopped doing it. It just didn't work for me. So similar to the way that I started my business doing academics, test prep, and college essays, but then ultimately dropped the first two of those when I found out I didn't like it and I wasn't very good at them. I did the same thing here where I tried out coaching and it just wasn't my thing. So I've dropped it and I've gone back to my core competency. So there's a little bit of like poking around to find parallel industries where the same skill set can apply. I think that's going to be a forever journey, but it's certainly one of those things that I'm trying to rack my brain about now in the off season so that we can be set up when next off season comes around to really invest in them.
Wonderful. So really, it's a business that doesn't require a ton of startup capital. It's something where you don't need a massive tech stack. It sounds like by choice, and it seems like it still works for you that you don't need 14 different pieces of software to help you stay organized, maybe some spreadsheets, maybe general email communication. You don't necessarily need a virtual assistant. Your profit margins are in the 90% range. Like it's an incredibly high profitability business that is running kind of in the old school manner, and it's working for you.
Exactly. And that's why I like encouraging people, if they're ever thinking about doing any kind of educational service, I always encourage people to try it out because it's such a low bar to entry. If you can just get a first foothold with a few clients, and that's usually working your network as hard as you can and trying to set up a couple referral channels, that's the hardest part, is getting that first client. But as soon as you kind of go from there, you can choose how much you want to scale it. You can choose how many hours you spend on this. It's the kind of thing where we're going to take a skill you already have in your head, some kind of educational system that you've been through, And then you can just help someone else kind of learn the ropes. It's very low bar to entry, very high margin. It's good for someone who's just testing the waters to see if this kind of a sole entrepreneurship thing is right for them. Or in my case, if a side hustle is right for them, right? That's how I started. So it's a nice sort of experimental industry for people to try out.
Awesome. All right. One last question for you. I want you to share your best piece, your number one piece of entrepreneurial advice for our listeners.
This, I feel like, might feel like kind of, fortune cookie wisdom for people. We will see if people feel that way or not. But my main thing is this. I think that most people filter themselves out of entrepreneurship because they don't feel like they're the quote unquote right person to be an entrepreneur, right? There's some set of cultural norms or societal standards that say, well, you need these personality traits, or you need to come from this background, or have gone to this college to be a successful entrepreneur. You need to be extroverted and creative and, disciplined or aggressive or whatever it is. I have found that that's just completely fabricated. And usually when I talk to folks who are successful entrepreneurs, they don't share those cultural traits at all. They're sort of a diverse mix of backgrounds and personalities. So what I always tell people is like, look, I had absolutely no intention to go into kind of solo entrepreneurship. I was a political science major in undergrad. I went to grad school for public policy so that I could work in government. And then I pivoted into corporate PR for 4 years. And now I'm a college essay consultant. So like none of that makes any sense. But here we are, right? Like, that's fine. I am not a traditional business type person. I never studied it. I never thought I was going to end up here, but it does work. So what I always encourage people to say is like, look, there are 100 tips out there about like the tactical ways you can get your business started. I think those are great. That's worth spending time looking into. But fundamentally, the thing I think that holds people back the most is their own self-filtering process. It's themselves saying, oh, this isn't really meant for me, or I could never be successful, or it's not really my thing. I don't have the background for this. It's fine. There is no set of traits that's right for this. There is no background that's right. It's all about what you're willing to make happen and the community that you can have to support you in that journey. So that's what I like to tell people.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Well, hey, Carter, this has been awesome. I want to make sure our listeners can find you if they want to reach out to you. Maybe they're of high school age and they need help with their essays, or if there are any of our listeners who want to reach out and talk about how you went about building this business, how can we get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Yeah. CarterOsborneTutoring.com is where I keep all my contact information. And you're welcome to reach out to carter.e.osborne@gmail.com too. I welcome emails and phone calls from anyone who's curious about this. If it's a student, great. If you're a parent who just wants to learn about the college process, great. And if you're someone who's sort of looking into side hustles or entrepreneurship, send me an email. We can chat. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff.
All right. Awesome. Carter, well, thank you so much. This has been a great time, man. Thank you for your time and your knowledge.
Hey, it's a pleasure, Brien. Thanks for having me on.
I hope you got as much knowledge from this as I did. Taking a simple concept of tutoring on college essays, making it a niche for yourself, starting it as a side gig and turning it into a full-time job, making over 6 figures a year and in only 6 months for the most part, which is crazy. Now, it's also pretty crazy that Carter was able to do this with putting no dollars behind marketing, and that's fantastic to grow a 6-figure business with absolutely no paid advertising or marketing. The dude is crushing it. But here at MU, there's one thing I really couldn't stop thinking about after this interview, and the fact remains that I think this is a business that could really scale to 7 figures and beyond. I mean, let's think about it. Carter said this is a totally unsaturated market from a provider standpoint. The demand exceeds the supply of available essay specialists. Let's say that you bring in a team of writers, people who you could find who are experts or at least trainable into the expertise of college essay writing. You bring them all together, maybe you put a couple bucks behind some marketing, maybe some review systems. Make sure you train your writers on how to tutor and how to be good with students. Something like that could scale pretty quickly, I think. This is something that could be that 7+ figure business. So just something we wanted to throw out there. So this is the type of business where the market is ripe for scale. Thank you all for joining us today, and a big thank you to Carter for coming on the show and sharing his knowledge and his wealth of expertise in college essay writing. For all of you out there who maybe you haven't started a business yet, you're still thinking about it, I want you to check out millionaireuniversity.com/training. You can pick up your free business course that we've developed for you and get a head start on creating your business. All right, that's all for me, folks. Signing off, Brien Gearin here with the Millionaire University podcast. We will catch you on the next episode.